What's going on, everybody? This is Fry. So today we are doing the next part of redoing all the tier lists here in 2023. We've found a lot of new decks over the last few years, played in the tournament, learned a lot new things about the game. So I'm going to go through all the cards one at a time in the Beastly class. I've changed my opinion about a lot of cards, and we are just going to get right into it. And we are going to be starting off with Goat. Goat is a card that's mostly good, let's say, with Secret Agent. Goat is just a 0-cost 1/1. It's a pet. It can grow every single time a goat gets hurt, which is just it, and hover goat. It's mostly just useful in Secret Agent decks. It's not even completely necessary. Sometimes it really even bricks, because the card is not actually very good in itself. Because, you know, usually if you're running cards in a deck, you want them to have independent value. This has absolutely terrible independent value. You can play in pet decks, and pet decks are not very good either. So that's why I'm going to be putting Goat in C tier. Next is Cat Lady. The only good deck to date that we've really had with Cat Lady is OTK Cat Lady. I have a couple of versions. Check those out on YouTube. It's a really crazy Morticia deck where you buff this with a bunch of lunch boxes, teleport it in, and bonus attacks, and win it all in turn one. Tried so many pet decks. Pet decks are very low tier. I'm going to put Cat Lady because it's kind of just good in one deck. I'm going to put it in B tier. Cheese Cutter is easy S tier, one of the best cards in the game. Auto include this in basically every single Beastly deck. It's very good tempo. It's a control card because you can play this on turn one and they have to remove it. If this does hit face, it's a must answer card, so it's at least controlling for one turn, at least an even trade with whatever they play on one, unless you play it on Heights and you make a bad trade with Garlic. But include this in every single deck. If you conjure even that one Beastly card, the Gourmet set is very good and gives you a lot of tempo, and you can sometimes just take over the game just with a Cheese Cutter or two. Extremely strong card, easy S tier. Dog Walker, the big debate is what's better, Dog Walker or Cheese Cutter. I definitely like Cheese Cutter better. Dog Walker I found useful though. We even used it a little bit in the tournament because I was facing opponents that were running a lot of Haunted Pumpkins for some reason. That was what they were running against me. So it's a useful card just to control on turn one. It's not quite as good if you play it. It's just kind of doesn't do anything if they pass turn one and then play a good card on turn two that wins the trade. It's kind of useless in that sense. I think it has its uses. I'm going to put it in B tier. Fraidy Cat is a very strong card. You can include in a lot of tempo decks. It's very nice to be in a deck with a lot of other cards like Cheese Cutter that need to be answered, because then when they answer those cards, the Fraidy Cat will punish, with tricks, the Fraidy Cat will punish them by growing. Usually these cards you have to use tricks in order to be reliable, or else you can just play Fraidy Cat on turn two, pass, hit him with a lightning bolt, and your cards are still growing. I'm going to put it in A tier because I think it's actually a very underrated card. Nibble is a good card in control decks. It's decent. It's not quite as good as Bungie or Rolling Stone, but it is a decent card. We use it in all the Morticia control decks for sure. It can also correct a trade because it's -1/1. It also has some heals. I'll put it in B tier. It's a solid card. Secret Agent is a card that you can build an entire, again, genre of deck around. It's the Secret Agent, and I'll show you quickly another card in the Beastly class that goes together with it. Swimmer. You're basically going to be scooping up small cards, giving them a 3/3 buff, and playing it together with the Swimmer. It's a decent strategy. We've had a lot of success with those. We've also done Secret Agent Zombot, which is a joke. It's basically only useful with Synchronized Swimmer in one type of deck. It's either low A or high B. I'm going to put it in B because its uses is actually very limited. Skunk Punk, easy F tier. No explanation necessary. It's not even good in pet decks. Snorkel Zombie, haven't found a lot of use. I've seen some Burn Boogaloo decks that do a lot of aggro damage, and adding a little 1-cost 2/1 in the water is kind of useful just because it's chipping opponents to death with small bits of damage. Overall, not a very useful card. I'm going to put it in... I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and put it in... Nah, I'm putting it in D. It's not very useful. Even in the aggro Boogaloo decks, there's probably better options. Yeti Lunchbox is another card. A little bit of an underrated card, too, because, again, it gives a little buff. It's so inferior to cards like Healthy Treat, which is in a different class. This does work with the OTK Cat Lady. Pet decks, sometimes. Really, Lunchbox is not super useful. I'll put it in C tier. And then I'm trying to do this tier list so you can see a little faster so the video doesn't end up being an hour again. Botanist, man, this is a card that has been, of course, one of the subjects of very heavy debate between the Fry 'em Up community and the Discord community. They used to love this card. I don't even think they run it very much anymore. Besides for feeding this little plant of vampires, you can also play this into hunting grounds, which makes it into a 3/4 and then opens up, you know, the hunting grounds lane again for another buff. Sometimes, you know, using this to clog your opponent's lane so they can't play anything and suffocate them. I've seen that work. I've seen that work often. It's not super reliable. And more times than I've seen that work of suffocating your opponent so they can't make a play is this gets turned into a Pine Clone. It turns into a base for a Gatling Pea for a, for a Shroom. It's the little P, you know, 1/1 that it makes gets it could be a Puff Shroom, so it can turn into a Gloom Shroom. It can turn into a Pine Clone that can be upgraded with an Elderberry. There's a lot of cards that actually utilize little 1/1s on the opponent's side of the field. So in my opinion, not a very good card. It has its uses. I'll put it in C tier. Cyborg is a really, really good card. Not only is it a very good control card on turn 2, you just play on turn 2, it also gives you this Vengeful Cyborg. If you can find a use for this card that you're gaining, I mean, this is just like a super high stat, very good ability hunt. Because it's controlling whatever they play on turn 2, particularly because Triceratops, which is probably the strongest card in the game, it dies so badly on turn 2 to Cyborg when you play this. If you can find a use for that big, even without the ability of gaining Vengeful Cyborg, this is a very good card, and especially because it gains you a late game card. It's an early game that conjures an automatic late game card, and both, you know, the big Borg is not very good, but the Cyborg itself the Cyborg itself is good. You know, especially if that big Borg you're running like Gadget Scientist, you can make it do bonus attacks. I'm going to have to put this in S tier because I think this is a good inclusion in basically any deck in the game, whether it be tempo, aggro, control, and it's just so much value. I'm going to have to put that in S tier. Definitely a card I've gained an appreciation of over the years and over the tournament. Energy Drink Zombie, it's rough, you know, running this in sports decks, not very good with the Smash. Sometimes it can get out of control. Sometimes you can play it into hunting grounds and it starts getting a lot of value because as it's moving in and out of the hunting grounds, it will not only get a 1/1 buff from its own ability, but it'll gain like a 2/2 buff when you play into the hunting grounds when it leaves or when it goes back in. Overall, not a very useful card because it's really a 2-cost 1/1. The stat line, the base stat line is really not good. It's pinging block meter a lot, and for it to grow, it takes a few turns for it to grow into something with even decent stats for a 2-cost card. So that is why I'm going to put it in D tier. Extinction Event, really strong overall. Just it can be used as a control card, can be used even as a tempo card. It answers Pine Clones really well. It answers, I don't know, Poppin' Poppies. There's a lot of decks, you know, decks typically run many copies of a single card. But even if this is just hitting one thing, the fact that this can answer, you know, basically anything they play on turns 1 and 2 makes it a very solid card. I'm going to put it in A tier because it's a good inclusion in any deck. We have not yet found the good decks for Haunting Ghost or for Haunting Zombie. Haunting Zombie obviously spawns Haunting Ghost. I have some ideas. I'd like to find some uses for these, but in the meantime, Haunting Zombie, that is a terrible card. And then can make a maybe half decent card is going in F tier, and the Haunting Ghost, which at least gets a little bit more decent value instead of having to spend a whole extra. I know that the other one conjures a card, but this at least gives you value without having to spend another 2 brains. The problem with these cards is the cost. If these were 1-cost cards, this would be very good. Even if, let's say, Haunting Ghost as 1 probably would be a little bit too good, but anyway, Haunting Zombies in F and Haunting Ghost is going in D. I've seen sometimes getting value from these, but it's very rare. Hunting Grounds is a very solid environment. It can actually be played in a lot of different types of decks. It's a pet, so sometimes we run it in Cat Lady, but you know, the reason this environment is good is because it gets value every turn. You're playing something into it, which if they front it makes a good trade, and if they play in a different lane, it gives a buff, and then you get another buff the next turn. The fact that you can place at the end of the turn during the trick phase and immediately get value when you play into a zombie makes it a very solid card. I'm going to be putting it in A. Killer Whale, have not found the deck for this, man. I mean, it's so much cost for a 2/1 buff, a 2-cost 2/1. It's just not enough. And it's, you know, very circumstantial for this to even be able to synergize because it's so easy to remove the turn it's played. It's going in F tier. Next, we got Pied Piper, which, again, every once in a while is really good against Shroom for 2, but it's so outclassed by so many other cards that can deal with little 1/1s in this game. It's got to go in F tier. Next is a very niche card, just Squirrel Herder. It's not a good card. It's a 2-cost 2/2 Gravestone. Every once in a while, If you know your opponent's going to be running nuts or berries and you're playing against people who are obsessed with 3-nut and stuff, this would be good. Berries are not super meta. Nuts are maybe a little bit more. There are a lot of more decks with nuts. It's very, very niche, and it hardly ever justifies being a card in a deck. Every once in a while, it's fine. Running 1 or 2 as a tech could be okay. It's hard to know. It's either low C or high D. I'm going to put it in D because of the overall amount of times that it really is practical to run it. It could have been low C, though. Synchronized Swimmer is a good card. Not only does it work with Secret Agent, this actually has a lot of other uses in the game. If you play this together with Warlord, so it's copying a big card. The Warlord will give every card that you play subsequently a 1/1 buff, and then the Synchronized Swimmer not only copies the stats of a big card that's been buffed by Warlord, but it itself gets its own buff, so that's a use we've used Synchronized Swimmer. You can use it even to copy big cards. You can place together with cards, even like Blob is viable, like cheap cards that can end up having a lot of stats, and then you copy them with a Synchronized Swimmer. You can just buff a single card. You play like even just a turn 5 play, which is very good, is like Hover Goat. Which you buff something for 2/2, and then you copy a Synchronized Swimmer. You can use Area 22 at the end of last turn and buff something, and, again, it's just a 2-cost card, so even a 2-cost 3/3 Amphibious is amazing, and sometimes this can be a 2-cost 7/7 Amphibious. I'm actually going to put this in A tier because it has a lot of uses. It's a very, very strong card. Total Eclipse is just a solid environment. It doesn't give you a lot of value every turn. It's usually just getting value one time. I guess it can like nerf the stats of something. It can be used as a control. We use this every once in a while. It's overall a pretty underwhelming environment. It's just okay. I'll put it in C tier because it's not a bad option to just have a little extra control, and mostly used to cover opponents, plan environments. And it adds a little bit of control. Zookeeper is not a card that we've found really any good decks with. Again, you can do the thing where you play, a pet on turn 2 and you play Zookeeper, Camel Cross on turn 3. You can do that with the Smash, but it's very hard because, again, it's a 2-cost 2/2. It's not good by itself. It needs other cards to be good, and even when you have those other cards, it's so easily removed. You're going to have to build a whole deck around it for it to have enough pets to justify it, and I've never really found the good deck for Zookeeper. To make a statement, I'm putting in D tier because pet decks are really not that good. Alley News is a solid control card. It works obviously better if you have environments like Black Hole or Hunting Grounds, which means they're going to be playing their plants into environments a lot. Solid card in almost any single deck. I'm going to put Alley News. It's also cheap, does a lot. Sometimes just, not in an environment, and just being a 2/2 nerf can sometimes answer, a Captain Cucumber, and that's a ton of value. Because of how versatile this card is, and I'm really rating it as to how viable is this to play in your decks, I'm going to be putting this in A. It would either be high B or low A. It's not really like a take over the game card, but it's very solid. Area 22 is a really, really good environment. The fact that you're adding stats and Frenzy to a single lane is really good. If they don't answer the environment and they answer the card in it, then you're just shoving more cards. So this is like a must-answer environment that gives a ton of value. This is either, it's such a good addition if you're not playing with, exactly the Smash, who has Going Viral, which is, I'd say, a better card. This is kind of like auto-include in a lot of decks because it makes Frenzy. Even with Trickster, this is a good card, because now your Trickster does 8/8, is an 8/8 Frenzy, which is ridiculous. It just has so much value. This is either high A or low S tier. It really is so versatile, and I'm going to be putting it in low S tier. I'll put it together with S tier cards because it's actually kind of hard to find a deck where it's not a good idea to run the Area 22. Really solid card. Dolphin Rider. So Dolphin Rider, very not useful card. You can use it as a little bit of an aggro card, but in the water lane. But it's overall really it dies too easily. It's a 3-cost 3/2. It's really bad. I'm putting an F tier. Hover Goat, it has some uses together with the Goat. You can use this to buff things again and copy the stats of Synchronized Swimmer. Playing this into Hunting Grounds means that it's probably going to get pinged and go back into your hand, and you can replay it for more value. So it sort of represents card draw, kind of. It's okay. I'll put it in C together with Goat. Loudmouth is a very underrated card. The fact that you're able to, I love playing this in Electric Boogaloo with dancing cards, let's say with Aerobics Instructor on turn 2, which is a 2-cost 2/3 that grows all dancing zombies. by 2 attack every single turn. So not only is it obviously synergetic because this is also a dancing zombie, you can use this to protect your key cards like your aerobics instructor, or even something like a teacher, like an unlife of the party, just something. This will come out of the grave at the end of the turn, and this is a zombie that plays reactively. You know what I mean? You see what the plants do, and then you react to that, which makes this very good. I've had a lot of success with Loudmouth. I think a very underrated card. I'm not going to quite put it in A, but I'll put it in B tier because it's a really very solid card and a very good addition to a lot of decks. Vampire, you know, we've had some decks where you teleport in Vampire. It's mostly good with Immorticia. Every once in a while, you can do a deck with, you know, Hunting Grounds and Black Hole, which are all going to be, again, forcing plants into a single lane where this is going to be able to consume them. It has very low starting stats, though, for a 3-cost card. And it's not very good in itself. It can brick a lot. You know, it really relies heavily on other cards. Again, you can feed it things with the dude. I'll put it in C tier. You can feed it things with the botanist, like we said before. Vitamin Z, the problem with this is that it relies on you having a zombie survive the plant phase, and plants have a lot of removal, and you're not always going to have it. If you swarm very heavily, still, there's probably better things than adding 3/3 to one card. Even if you do spend 3, they just can Shamrocket it. The removal is also the reason Vitamin Z is very cheap, because if they use a Shamrocket, it removes not only the base card, but it also removes the Vitamin Z effectively. And that's why this doesn't have. It's very sad, and I wish removal was cheaper. If I wish removal was less good. If removal got nerfed, this would be a very good card, but unfortunately, it's in D tier. It's almost useless. Sometimes it can be very good though. Zombie Yeti. The only deck this is good in is OTK Cat Lady. Check out that video explaining exactly how that deck works, and watch a few games. You'll see. Otherwise, this is utterly useless. I mean, I've tried other times where you're teleporting this in and using it as a control card. It's only good in one deck. I'm going to put it in... I mean, it's viable. It's viable in one deck. It's a really important part of OTK Cat Lady in order to get enough lunchboxes to buff your cat lady to kill them in one turn. That's tough. How it's only useful in one deck I'm putting it in D tier, actually, because it's only useful in one deck, and it's so utterly useless in any deck that's not OTK Cat Lady. Thank you, Love to Fry, for subbing. Ancient Vampire is going to be the same as Vampire. It's really just a bigger Vampire. Don't try to use this. I'll go through quickly. Don't try to use this with going viral, because it means this card needs to survive. The other card that you're using the going viral on needs to survive for several turns in order for that engine to get going. Just think, you're playing this on 4, you're playing another card, plus going viral on 5, and that card has to kill a minion. It's not synergetic with going viral. You're mostly just teleporting this in, and it's useful in itself, and every once in a while, again, this can buff another minion. If you're teleporting a lot of frenzy minions, you can play this in the water lane and play Mustache Monument plus Bounty Hunter, and the Bounty Hunter will get a little buff. Overall, not a very good card. We'll put it in C tier. It's viable, though. B flat is a completely useless card. It's just so expensive and such an unreliable form of removal. It's completely outclassed by Alien Ooze, which is itself a very cheap card and costs 3 and is a much better option. We have used this in Control Boogaloo before. I'll put it in D tier because it does have sort of a use in one deck, ancient deck from the past. So I think for nostalgia, no, I'll just put this in F tier. It's not very good. Honestly, Control Boogaloo, the old school one where you're running B flat and you're running Locust Swarm and all those cards to control opponents until you play, you know, Garg Feast. It's not a good deck. There was a point where Control was more solid, you know, Boogaloo's options, but now, man, the early game is so strong on the plant side, on both sides, that it's really hard to just play straight out Control for an 11 drop. So, all right, Cosmic Yeti. I mean, I have to put this in F tier. It's so understated. It doesn't stay on the field. It's the whole reason that Cosmic Yeti and the other Yeti that I mentioned before are not very good. They don't remain on the field. They lose you tempo. Sometimes the card it conjures could be very good. It gets a 1/1 bounce, but it's just a worse version of Yeti, and it's not even useful in that one OTK Cat Lady deck. So that's F tier. Bounty Hunter is an underrated card. This is such a versatile card. This can be used as a tempo card. It has very good stats, like on 4/4/4 with the Frenzy, with the card draw. Very good stats. It can be used as a control card if you have teleport to teleportation zombie and actually make very good trades. It's always frenzying through, so this has the ability to eat a lot of cards. You can play this in control, you can play this in tempo. It has hunt, so it's not a control card. You got to be careful playing this on 4 because sometimes they can play a card to distract it and then play a very strong play. It is turn 4. That stage of the game. It's either an S tier or A tier. It's a little hard to decide. It's not quite as it's also very good in science decks. Man, there's so many decks that's good in science. It's very good with Mustache Monument. I'm even going to do a deck where I play Mustache Monument, Trickster, and Mime Guard together with Bounty Hunter soon, and that will be a win condition. All right, it's high A or low S. I'm actually going to stick it in S because it's a very solid card. It's hard. Again, works in most decks, and it's super, super useful in a lot of decks. Oh, is it quite? Yeah, I'm going to put it in S tier. It actually is more viable than the cards I'm putting in A. Like, it's more useful in more decks, so I'll put it in S. Next is Kangaroo, which is a card that is, I don't even know why this exists. When the game was in beta, this was a 4-cost 4/5, and even with those stats, this wouldn't be good because it can be removed with 1 damage from the field, and then you have to spend a whole excessive 4 brains. This is just one of the most useless, utterly useless, garbage, trash pieces of complete uselessness in the game, and it's easily going in F tier. Overstuffed Zombie is... Okay, so we've used this. You can use this with Black Hole. It doesn't have the card draw. It doesn't have the hunt ability to heal itself. It doesn't have the frenzy. Obviously that Bounty Hunter has. This really relies on other cards to be good. You got to feed it. You got to use it with Hunting Grounds or with Black Hole. We've had minimal success doing that. It hasn't been great. I'll put it in D tier because it's not a super useful card. The fact it heals itself, it's basically just playing until it gets removed by something, and it can just get shamrocketed. I don't know. All right, next is Cheese Shover. I've seen a little bit of uses for this, and I think this might be an underrated card. I should really try this more. My friend Seaman likes using this, teleporting it in as a removal card. The problem, of course, is that it only removes cards played the turn before. Not that turn. That's a problem with every dry zombie, especially dry zombies that rely on removal for its value. You play this destroy 3-drop, okay, so they play a 4-drop. You got a 4/3, they got, I don't know, a Bananasaurus Rex. Again, teleporting it in makes it sort of useful. This is rough. Sometimes this really saves games. I'm going to put it in low C tier. It has a couple uses. Nah, it's in D tier. I can't put it in C together for these cards. All these cards are way more useful. All right, next we got Sneezing Zombie. Very underrated card. You can play this together with Graveyard if your brain freeze, and then it'll pop out and make all the plants get -1/1, which is a cool way of controlling. You can teleport this in with which works. Again, this has the problem of when you play it, it doesn't answer anything they play that turn. But honestly, if this can kill several cards, they have a couple Admiral Navy Beans, a couple of mushrooms on the field, and this can actually decimate some boards, and is a very good answer. The other thing that this does, which is very awkward, it answers Swarm, but it also answers heal decks, and heal decks are S tier, SS, double S tier. On the plan side, I'll definitely get more into that. The discoveries we've made this last few years about the heal decks when I cover the Solar class. We'll do that a different day. So it's niche. I've even done a decks where we just run a bunch of hard counters, and the Sneezing Zombies were overwhelmingly good. So it works with Immorticia, with teleports. It works with Brain Freeze, and sometimes every once in a while it can be okay. I'm gonna put it in C tier because it actually is a decent card. I'm putting it in C tier, and that's that. Next, we got a 4-cost 4/3 Frenzy. Again, you can use it in sports decks. Now it's pretty late. It's too expensive for sports decks. Usually want much lower curve. Pretty poor stats. The Frenzy doesn't help when it has 3 health. Every once in a while it's okay. It's just mediocre and average. I'll put it in D tier. Next, we got Locust Swarm, or as I like to call it, Slocust Swarm. It's so outclassed by the other removal cards. Honestly, this is what a removal card should look like in the game. 5 costs, remove a zombie, man. Remove a plant. That would be good if this game had that kind of removal. But yeah, it's just so outclassed by Alienus and by every other removal card. It's so expensive. You're sacrificing 5 brains of not playing a zombie and hoping to the lore that they play one big plant that turn. If they end up playing two small plants that turn, you're screwed because they're going to end up gaining tempo on you. I'm not going to say it's completely useless. It's better than piano. I'll put it in D tier. Every once in a while, it's fine. Don't use this in a pet deck just because it says the word pet. That's a mistake. Pet decks need very efficient plays and very swarmy. You're never going to want to spend 5 on a Locust Swarm. Mondo Bronto, it's been so hard. I've tried, again, so many times to find value from this, using it with Terrify, teleporting it in. But even if you teleport this in on turn 6, it's usually not doing the Dino Roar ability. It's usually, a 5/5 will usually make a good trade against most things in the game. It's amphibious. You're mostly actually just see this with Mechasaur, that this is the only history zombie that can appear in the water. Running this in a deck is almost never a good idea. I'm not going to put it in F, but I'll put it in D. I know some of you will think it's actually higher, but it actually is way too expensive. Its ability looks so cool, but it's way too expensive for what it does. You basically have to teleport this in, then spend 5, and then spend your 7th brain that turn on drawing a card. And it's very hard to pull off. That's too many cards combo for one card that at the end of the day isn't even giving you that much value. It's very circumstantial. Obviously, if they have a soul patch on the field, it ends up being amazing in that scenario, but it's very unlikely that this will get value for the huge investment that you have to use in order to actually teleport in and draw cards, and it just dies to Shamrock usually before it does anything. Next is Smashing Garg. It's absolutely awful. What can I say? I even tried it in a deck yesterday and we ended up taking it out. I was doing Immorticia and teleporting in Garg Synergy. It's just understated for a 5-cost card. The Frenzy isn't very good. Giving other Gargs Frenzy it doesn't justify 5 brains in a slot in a deck. It's so outclassed by Supernova Garg, which is the next card. This is actually a pretty decent card, but I have to put it in F tier. I don't think it's viable at all. Next, Supernova Garg. This is a cool card. This actually has high stats. The difference between 5/5 and 5/7 is the difference between losing a trade and winning a trade, or an even and winning. So very high stated card, and then it also just sort of answers a lot of things. There's cards, again, run multiple copies. So this is a decent ability because there will be multiple copies. Obviously, this is a devastating card to play against Pineclone if they don't have an answer. It has the problem of being a big card that just has the stats, and again, once you start getting to 5 costs, the loss of this dying to any very efficient plant removal, it's very, very harsh. You can teleport this in. We've had success. It's decent. I'm not going to even put it in B. I'll put it in C. It's not probably a necessary part of any deck ever, but it's decent. It's decent. It has its uses. C tier. Next, we got Big Borg. So this is a good card if it's coming from the cheaper Cyborg that costs 2. You're basically getting this for free. Actually running this deck is never a good idea. It's a 5-cost 5/5 with no, Hunt, that's not even necessarily a good thing, because that will ruin, you play this in front of something, makes a good trade, and then they manipulate it and move it to a lane where it's either getting a bad trade or just getting chump blocked by a 1-cost card. It's really, really bad. I'd probably rather run Smashing Garg, honestly, than Big Borg. It's a science card. I don't care. It's not useful to run. If you want Big Borg, run Cyborg. That's how you get that. Deep Sea Garg. Again, you mostly see this from a card that's thrown into the water from Garg throwing Garg, because it's the only amphibious Gargantua. Actually running this in the deck is really, really bad. It's a 6-cost card that's just stats. Doesn't even have Frenzy. If you'd at least give this Frenzy, give it something, give it some abilities, it would be viable, but it's really not. It is really, really not. Deep Sea Garg is going straight where it belongs. I actually don't have access to I'm trying to fix my thing here. I'm gonna have to shrink the tier list a little bit. There you go. Did I miss anything here? I think we're good. All right, perfect. We're putting this in F tier. See ya. And I lost my thing again. Next is going to be King of the Grill. So at least this has Frenzy. At least it can draw cards. Not, again, a very super useful card. Very hard to find a use for this. If I'm being optimistic, I'll put it in a higher tier, but realistically, this is in D. Again, it's too expensive for what it does. It just should cost less. Yeah, and removal is too strong. Any card that costs 5 or more is gonna always be at a disadvantage, unless it is just game devastating. I'll show you a card like that in a second. Here is an underrated card. It is Maniacal Laugh. So Maniacal is a very good finisher. It's unreliable in the fact that you need to have a card on the field, and this is very expensive. You're passing for 6, and but again, this adds a lot. It's 5/5 and frenzy. So not only is it growing a card, it's making it into a. It turns any card in the game into a finisher, as opposed to Vitamin Z is just adding stats. It's not even necessarily going to hit phase. This adds obviously a lot fewer stats per cost. Well, a little bit less stats per cost, but adding the frenzy is the key. Adding a lot of stats into one minion is also very good because, again, it's only charging the block meter once, makes it easier not to get blocked. I love using this in swarm decks, so you'll more likely have a small card to play this on. It turns into a finisher. I like using it in decks with bonus attacks because then the bonus attacks become very good. Playing this first and then playing a card like Gadget Scientist or something that does a bonus attack is really very, very good. Very solid finisher in a lot of decks. Kind of underrated. This is either going to go in... Oh, it's either going to go... This board is too big. I don't know what do I have to do here to get some respect around here. Here, I know what I have to do. I have to... Okay, I'll grab it from here. This is fine. We're almost done. Where did I put Maniacal Laugh, though? Oh, no. I'm messing everything up. It's all going to shiz. Maniacal Laugh is going in overall usefulness. Honestly, I'm going to go with my gut here. It's either going to be high B or low A. I'm going to say it in A because, really, it's useful in a lot of decks. A lot of decks. It's a really, really good option. It's outclassed a little bit, actually. The card that outclasses it is Area 22, which, again, adds stats and frenzy. Only on ground lanes. This adds a little bit stronger. It is outclassed by Area 22. Even in some of like the Brain Freeze decks where the Discord guys lock in was running Maniacal, I was just cutting them for Area 22 and lock out, lock in. I don't remember whose was who. All right, I'll put in A tier and that's that. Here's Garg throwing Garg. So this is very useful, even though it's a very expensive card, and just throwing this on the field is usually not going to work out. You can teleport this in, and sometimes if you've had other things to absorb removal, again, it's a high risk, high reward play because it's very expensive and dies to removal, but you can teleport it in. It's such high reward. That's the point, and that's the reason why I'm actually going to put this in a high tier. I will be putting this in B tier because, again, if you teleport this in front of team-ups, it's going to spawn 2 Gargs. You can, again, control the Morticia and just teleport this in. It sort of is circumstantial. It's not very good just to teleport in dry. Again, sometimes 6 damage wins the game, but you need the opponent to have a weak plant on the field for this to be good, and then it wins the trade and it spawns something in another lane. It's a decent finisher. It's limited in terms of how much you can actually use it, though, and that's why I'm putting it in B tier, because it has to have exactly teleports or a lot of other cards to absorb. A lot of cards to absorb the removal they have. So it's high risk but extremely high reward. Going in B tier. Next we have Nurse Garg, which you can do this with a Morticia deck where you teleport this in before you teleport Zombot. There's always going to be better options. Nurse Garg is not a very good card. It can save games sometimes, but actually running in a deck, it's going to lose games way more than it's going to save games in niche situations where you really need that healing. I'm not going to say it's completely useless, but it's not very viable, and that's why I'm putting it in D tier. Where did I put it, though? It just fell. I'm having problems with... Oh, here it is. All right. It's just that this tier list has gotten way too big, way too fast. Next is gonna be Octo Zombie. Way too expensive for what it does. I know it gives you unlimited Octo Zombies, but that means you're spending unlimited brains summoning one card that dies really, really hard to removal. This is not a good card, guys. This is not a good card. Again, every once in a while, we'll make a deck where you play this, you teleport it in, and they don't have an answer, and you leap it into a Zombot the next turn. It's not a good card. I'm putting it in F tier. It's really never viable to run, even in Control Boogaloo. Is it even a good idea in that deck? Probably not. And the next card is something I'm guessing I've changed my opinion a lot about this over time. It's Zombot. So again, there's 2 decks for Zombot. as usual, for everything else in this class. There's Beastly with Brainy, because then you can teleport in Zombot, and that is a good deck. You control with the Morticia. Look up the Control and Morticia, the teleport Zombot decks. We have several versions of that on YouTube. We even have Zombot Trickster Hybrid, which is a really, really solid, very, very solid deck. Arguably one of the best in Morticia decks. You can also run this with Brain Freeze and Graveyard, which is less good. But, it pops out of the gravestone on turn 9 and decimates their entire field. Still a very overrated card, because I think people see this ability and don't realize how terrible it is. Usually when people play a Zombot dry, it is fronted by something, and then the rest of the sun they have left over is used to actually win that turn. It's still, to this day, most times I see Zombot play dry, the opponent does win this turn. It's viable, though. It is viable. It's honestly borderline top tier, and I'm actually going to put it in B. I probably didn't put it in B last time. Don't play this dry, though. Only play it with Teleportation Zombie, or maybe Graveyard, and that's it, guys. And that's it. It's putting in B tier. I can't put it lower than Garg throwing Garg. It's just as viable. When you teleport this in, it's game-saving. I don't know if I should give it extra credit for being the real activator of leap decks. When you're leaping, your goal really is to get up to a 9-cost card with Evolutionary Leap and Transformation Station and get to Zombot. I'm putting in B tier, solid, actually solid win condition in several decks, and that's why it goes in B. All right, guys, I think we did pretty good in terms of time. I think we're definitely under an hour for that tier list. Hope you guys enjoy. This is the Beastly class tier list and PvZ Heroes. Glad you guys have stuck around the channel for all these years and seeing how we're finding so many uses out of a lot of different cards. I will see you guys in the next tier list. That was really fun. Peace. This is Pry.